Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So final week of Battlegrounds has started, and this is the week that matters the most. This is the week that is going to decide where you end up ranking. Therefore, I promptly in the morning stream managed to get my way all the back up in rankings as well, because obviously now we need to take it more seriously. On that note, this meta is quite interesting as well, because we do see a brand new node that we have never played against, not really anyways, I think, in form of encroaching root, where basically no matter what you do, every 12 seconds you get rooted for 4 seconds, unless you are in the middle of the special attack. So that part is basically exactly the same as encroaching stun. Unlike the encroaching stun, however, if you are rooted, you are free to throw a special attack during that root, and it's gonna let you go basically. So that is the advantage there. And the second node is kinetic transference, which does make this much harder. And this meta is a hard meta, and I love it personally. I do enjoy it. I understand if you don't, you know, we each have different preferences. I personally am not a big fan of nuke metas, but I do like this one because it is definitely one of those where anything can happen. Right, and obviously we are here to try and help you out with your deck a bit and give you some suggestions of champions that function best. At the moment, I can promise you that Quicksilver is an absolute menace on defense. He does have very hard to get away from level 2 with million hits, which would basically push him immediately to level 3, unless you eat it to the face, in which case it does a ton of damage to you and you probably get KO'd anyways. Level 1 is dexable, however, with all the things combined and happening in the fight, you would need a very specialized counter in this meta to deal with Quicksilver, and also on top of it, all quite good knowledge on how to fight him. So he is one of more frequent bans for me. Unfortunately, I don't have one myself, and that kind of really annoys me, especially in this meta. Another science champion that is proving himself to be an MVP, as I did my climb to the top 3 this morning, is Mr. Fantastic. Mr. Fantastic has several great abilities to manage this game. Obviously, he is not going to be necessarily the quickest option for a bunch of these fights, but here goes why he is great in this meta. Number 1, he has access to very potent Petrify that mitigates the effects of kinetic transference. Number 2, he also deals with the root in a very reasonably good manner, where you can just parry heavier opponent, and you know, you do get kind of like a bit of a break. Then once you do build him up, you benefit from kinetic transference by being able to power drain your opponent. Also, the coolest thing about Mr. Fantastic in this meta is the fact that he will evade a lot. And that will definitely come into play when you're going to be going up against some of the more annoying champions that we are going to feature later on in this video, because when Punisher 2099 is going to throw his level 1 at you and you have built up enough debuffs, you will likely evade majority of those hits, therefore denying him those massive power gain surges. So Mr. Fantastic has a very great kit to deal with the problems in this meta. Now, offensively speaking, Scorpion in this meta is yet again extremely viable and potent, and that has to do largely with the kinetic transference. You still need to be able to play around root, but as you guys will notice, then the champions that play around the root the best and easiest are champions who can quite easily and freely spam their level 1 attacks, and that is actually one of the key requirements a lot of people still haven't caught on. Any champion that primarily uses level 1 or can easily switch to level 1 and does not have a specific need to build up to their level 2 is going to be much more easy to manage in this meta, because you will be able to bypass that encroaching root a lot more often. And then on top of that, obviously kinetic transference, giving your opponents some more power, can be extremely advantageous for Scorpion by giving you the opportunity to trigger your power stings much more frequently. So he has effectively increased amount of damage in this meta, and also a playstyle that lets him manage a root effectively. And I'm pointing out Nick Fury here, not because, you know, people wouldn't be running Nick Fury anyways in most of the decks and stuff like that, but I am bringing a special attention to Nick Fury for this meta, because the man is a menace on a completely different degree, where if he does happen to throw his level 1, then he basically can build himself back up to a new one or even a level 2, and if he keeps throwing his level 1s, you know, he will quite quickly go unblockable. Then on top of that, when you do get rooted, as you frequently will against this guy, then there is a very big danger of eating a level 3 or getting heavied if you can't fully dex it at all times. And this Nick Fury fight has just gotten significantly more harder than it normally is, with a lot more danger factor because of that increased power gain and that root messing up your rotations. And also, for whatever reason, he just seems to be throwing level 1s like nobody's business, even in your block these days. So you can't even really count on that. Now, obviously, I will be pointing out one of the most reliable Nick Fury counters for this meta that is kind of like a good old forgotten one, but there is an important interaction to know about. But yeah, be aware of Nick Fury. He is a menace in this meta. Moving on, Kingpin. Kingpin is also surprised. Again, Kingpin is one of those champions that most people do have in their decks anyways, the majority of the cases. But the reason why I'm adding Kingpin here right now is primarily because of his increased capability on defense, because it is going to be harder and harder to deal with this guy. And the reason for it is, if you normally go up against Kingpin, you can often have quite an annoying time baiting out his level 1s as is. His AI frequently gets a bit stingy, and with his increased power gain from rages, you know, there's going to be a lot of level 1s to bait out typically, and giving him extra power just makes it a lot worse. Now, combination of that and the fact that you pretty much never want to push him into 2 bars of power, otherwise he's going to go unstoppable and the fight just gets derailed very quickly. With the fact that once he gets his overpower buff, his specials will be unblockable, and once you're rooted, that can catch you off guard. And in general, it's just an extremely, extremely unpleasant fight. And in this meta in particular, again, be much more aware of Kingpin as a defender than you perhaps could have or should have been in the previous meta, because he's significantly more dangerous on defense now than he was. And the Domino is kind of similar champion for fairly similar reasons, because increase in amount of power gain the Domino gets makes her significantly harder to go up against. Not to mention the fact that when you get rooted, if you happen to be unlucky at a time, your dex doesn't even work, and there's virtually no way out of this catch-22, where if you're rooted, you don't have enough power to use your special attack, and she, you know, taps your block, you go unlucky, then you try to dex her hit in order to prevent her from gaining even more power, and that doesn't work, and then you try to parry her, but if she's nearby you, then, you know, you can't parry, and that fight can just go sideways extremely quickly. And you need to be extremely, extremely vigilant of her. Obviously lucky, not pushing her to level 3. And she's much, much more dangerous yet again. And then we have Punisher 2099, which is a very good recommendation for both offensive and defensive use in this meta. The great thing about him on offense is the fact that once you build up your battery to 100, you enter your mega power control mode, and you will find it much, much, much easier to deal with the node combination. Plus the fact that once you have built up, you can quite easily just keep spamming level 1s. You will sacrifice a bit of damage output, but you will extend the battery life duration that you have, and he's a very viable offensive option, especially for this meta. And then obviously defensively, unless you have a way to counter this guy, you're gonna have a miserable time, because his level 1 is virtually undexable, his level 2 is virtually undexable, and you can easily find yourself in a kind of like a endless loop of him throwing special attacks, you trying to dex them or block them or eat them, and he's just gonna seemingly have infinite amounts of special attacks, and you're gonna get screwed. So be aware of this guy running around Battlegrounds right now. Promise you, he's scary. And Mysterio has a very, very similar principle with a bit different execution, where Mysterio can give problems to even like kind of champions that typically would absolutely run through him, like Hercules or other bunch of cosmic champs. And again, the reason for it here is because once he gets to use a special attack, based on how many charges he had, and even if he didn't have charges, you can't ever immediately retaliate and punish those special attacks unless you have a very specific counter, because level 1, if you hit him, then you're going to get that damage reflect back. Level 2, there's a chance to miss and you're going to get hit in the face. So what that means, it means that the fight gets slowed down, but because of the encroaching root, that means that you get to your power bar slower typically, and as a result of that you end up getting rooted. And then you end up what you do, you block his hits and try and dex the heavy attacks that he starts throwing. But because there is additional power gain involved, he typically will get to another bar of power and throw another special attack, and it's going to be kind of like a vicious cycle of him having that permanently that level 1 damage reflect or level 2 miss mechanic active, and you're going to be struggling to advance your own game plan. So he's definitely very dangerous in defense now. And, you know, alternatively, he does have some offensive capabilities where you can get some power control off his level 2. Therefore, if in a pinch, you can use him offensively too. One of the cooler things here against Penny Parker, not against, but with Penny Parker. And Penny Parker is another champion that shines in this meta quite a bit more than normally would. And even though her overall defensive use has decreased, she bypasses kinetic transference flat out. As long as she has shield charges, kinetic transference is not a problem. And that means that you can pretty much play as normal as long as you keep an eye on root. And also the fact that you typically, you know, drop your level 1s means that you can time them very easily with the root activations, because she does have power control on those level 1s, and also they do last a while. So offensively, she is quite a suitable, quite capable option in a lot of different matchups, and one of the best Nick Fury counters in this meta as well, because she can completely bypass the second life. And Nick Fury throwing his level 1 in your block all of a sudden is a lot less dangerous if it doesn't give him like 2 bars of power back. So she works great on offense against a ton of champions, but also defensively she's much, much nastier than she used to be because of the increased power gain and because of the nature of her level 2. Her level 2 animation is quite crazy amount of hits that you cannot fully dex with average champions, which means that if you ever push her to level 2, she will basically always have 2 bars of power, or you will eat a level 2 to the face, which obviously will KO you if she has any amount of charges. And the alternative to it isn't much better, because if you keep religiously baiting out level 1s, then she's going to very, very, very quickly get past 11 charges, and that means that you're going to get your power burns placed on you, and you're going to be taking a ton of damage anyways. So again, a lot of counters that normally would work against Penny do not work nearly as well, or at the very least have much more margin for error. So Penny is a lot more dangerous here. Next champion is Galen, and Galen is again a very interesting one here, and I'm placing him primarily because of his defense, because his level 2 is hard to dex properly, but most often you will end up baiting out your level 1s. And again, all the problems here are if in the question whether you are capable of dexing that level 1 fully. Because if you are not, you will find yourself in a position where he just keeps spamming his level 1s and therefore gets above 100 charges of his planetary mass pretty much immediately. And with that, you're going to explode. And he's much harder on defense now than in previous metas. Also, additional point there is that any increase in power gain makes him a better defender, because typically the point of how you fight against Galen is that you get to knock him down with your special attacks enough times for him not to go in that harvest. But if you increase his power gain, he's going to have access to more special attacks, and he's much more likely to enter harvest much more quickly, and that's going to blow you up. So Galen again is significantly more dangerous as a defender than he is in a generic meta. Speaking of another champion that's extremely dangerous and great offensively and defensively, now Hyperion is one of the MVPs for this meta for quite a few different reasons. Number one, obviously a champion with extremely wild power gain, to be given even more power whenever you do try to parry him. It can cause quite a bit of problems, and it can stall the fights out drastically or force your opponent to hit level 3 more frequently than in an average situation. So Hyperion is quite lethal on defense. And the second point here is that offensively, Hyperion has the perfect toolkit to bypass both of the nodes. Because of his amazing amount of power gain, you will virtually always have a special attack that you can activate whenever root would activate or throw that window, so you can basically bypass it at all times. Or even if you get rooted, you will likely have a bar of power, so you can throw your special then. And also, because of how easy you can access your special attacks and conduct the fight, you typically have less need to parry or take hits and block, and that means that many fights are just much easier to manage because you give opponents less power. At the same time, for instance, if you drop a heavy attack and then you can just start spamming level 1s, an opponent will overall gain power slower than he would if you did normal combo hits, and on top of it, there's no need to parry to get your openings, so it's much safer in this meta. Moving on, Cersei. One of the coolest things with Cersei, and another champion that I did want to shout out, and I kind of can, I did try it out myself, it didn't quite work out, but the principle is going to be quite similar here. It applies to both Cersei and Captain America Sam Wilson, and that idea is that both of them shut down kinetic transference. Captain America Sam Wilson does it with his Bulwark buff, and Cersei does it with her Glancing buff. Obviously, Cersei, as always, is extremely dangerous as defender, if not even more so than normal now. And in this meta, she's also extremely capable as an attacker, because as long as you have your Glancing buff active, you can block all of those multi-hit special attacks. An opponent isn't going to get a single bit of power because they have reduced 100% ability accuracy. And there we go. It just shuts off the node. Terrax is much more dangerous in this meta as well because of the increased amounts of power gain and the fact that you can get rooted and the fact that he can force you to slow down and stop you from being aggressive if you don't want to take too much force field damage. Dealing with Terrax is much harder in this meta. There are champions obviously that will do it successfully, like recently mentioned Hyperion, for example, but in Terrax in general, imagine a situation where when you block, you give Terrax a whole bunch of power, therefore his rock field stays around longer, and then you get rooted, and Terrax is dashing in at you and trying to hit you, and even if you manage to dex the entire combo without giving him additional power, you are forced to stick around your face in that force field and take a lot of damage. So Terrax is quite a sadistic champion in this meta, I would say. Ebony Maw is a very similar case where it is extremely hard to counter Ebony Maw with increased amounts of power gain. And there is another horrible interaction here with Ebony Maw where his level 1 nullifies not only fury buffs but also precisions. And when you get rooted against Ebony Maw and he dashes in at you, most people's initial instinct is to dex in order to avoid giving opponent the power, and then, you know, especially because you can't parry Ebony Maw from a dashback anyways, so we'll try to dex and then, you know, potentially block or reparry. The problem with you triggering that dex is not only it will obviously feed Mystic Dispersion, as it normally would, the problem is also that you will immediately get the degen if he happens to throw a level 1 then, and the fight itself is a lot harder in this meta than it normally would be, so he himself is much more dangerous. On top of it, Ebony Maw is also quite an effective offensive option because he does have excellent power control on his special 3 and especially his heavy attack, being able to also steal opponents' power gain buffs. So he's like a very solid counter, for instance, for Hyperion as well as plenty of other different champions where you can just basically parry heavy and get yourself to level 3 if you are in a pinch, or ideally obviously stick to your level 2 rotation. It works extremely well. And Null is, I would say, the flagship menace of this meta, especially with an equity. He's exceedingly hard to deal with because you do have to already often watch for his corruption timer. If he happens to throw his level 1, then obviously his level 2s do travel for distance. Level 1 is virtually undexable, I would say. Level 2 is dexable, but still not always easy or possible, and quite it can go wrong. And in general, he just works like an absolute menace. And to make things worse, he also lowers your combat power rate if he happens to have thrown level 2 or with his defender abilities as well. So it's harder to cancel out those roots. So yeah, Null is a champion you will be seeing a lot in this meta. And then the final mention here is going to go to America Chavez, because America Chavez does become much more dangerous as a defender. And especially with the interactions with the root, there is much bigger likelihood she will end up throwing a heavy attack, for instance. But on top of that, she is a very solid attacker in this meta because of her ability to reverse opponent's power gain. And as long as you throw 2 heavy attacks, basically you can really heavy and block opponents' hits, and they will actually end up losing power instead of gaining power. And for meta like this, you really wish her buff was live already. Unfortunately, it isn't, but she's still a very safe and stable offensive option. Not to mention that she herself on offense easily plays around the root, primarily because she is, you know, very special spammy, because you do your rotation with a combo, couple heavy attacks, and then you immediately chain them into your specials and go for level 2, so on and so forth. So it is quite easy to play around root with her. So those are some of the MVPs so far that I have seen or discussed with different players, and I hope this helps you to do as best as you can this week in Gladiator Circuit. See you soon, guys.
Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about